Hey guys, it's Sam for Digital Meat in partnership with RizomLab. In this RizomUV tutorial, we're going to be looking at an overview of packing. If you're new to RizomUV, I suggest you go back and take a look at some of my other tutorial videos. These cover everything from transferring data, UI overview, seams and cuts, and the unwrap panel. Okay, let's jump in. Here I have a model of a scooter in Cinema 4D. It's been divided into two groups, and that's because some of the objects are in a subdivision surface and some are not. Let's have a look at the UVs for some of these objects. As you'll see, they're already unwrapped and have been packed. I'm actually going to keep the unwrap for these because this tutorial is about packing. So let's get back to our startup view. Select our subdivided parts, and we're going to use the Rizom bridge to scoot them over to RizomUV. Okay, our objects are now in RizomUV, and as you can see, the UVs for each object have been retained, but they now occupy the same UV space. While we're here, I'm just going to turn on the checker for both of our views. Before I begin digging into the packing tools, I just wanted to address the RizomUV controls. You may find that some of the key mouse presses I'm using don't perform the same functions when you're using them. And the reason for this is I've changed the RizomUV's default control scheme to something more familiar to me and mimics my 3D software of choice, Cinema 4D. You can find these settings here under Edit, Keyboard Mouse Customizer, and as you can see, I've got mine set to C4D. You have the choice out of many different control types. So obviously if you're a 3ds Max user, you can use that, or a Maya user. I'm sticking with C4D, so let's save and close this. If you are confused about key mouse click combinations, there's a handy guide on the right hand side here underneath the help select. Okay, let's get started. First we have the pack button, which is located up here. If we use this with no island selected, everything gets packed. So I'm just going to use the shortcut P. And as you can see, everything's been packed. There's no overlaps. However, if we make an island selection, only the selected islands will be packed. So let's back up. And I'm going to select Island Select Tool. And I'm just going to select one of these. There we go, that'll do. And we'll hit P. You'll notice that even though our unselected islands have not been packed, they have been scaled along with our packed island, which brings me to another setting that I'd like to deviate to briefly. So let's back up, and we'll keep this island selected, and I want to talk about AutoFit, which is located up here. The AutoFit button is enabled by default. When enabled, RizomUV will run an AutoFit operation after any packing is carried out. This scales the entire island set to ensure that everything fits within the tile space. You'll notice that the AutoFit button is currently greyed out, and that's because we've got an island selected. So we can just jump over to Edge mode, and now the AutoFit toggle button becomes available to us. I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to pack again using the shortcut P. This time you'll notice that our selected island has been packed, but no longer fits inside the UV space. Our unselected islands, however, have not been packed and have also not been scaled. So let's back up again with Ctrl Z, unselect our islands, and turn the AutoFit button back on, and run a pack again. I'm just going to zoom back in for a better view. The next tool I want to talk about is the Pack Translate button located here. This button will pack all islands if no selection has been made, or just the selected islands, much like the regular pack button we've just looked at. The difference with Pack Translate is that islands will keep their orientation and scale, So let's make this really obvious by using our transform tool to rotate and scale our islands. Let's unselect everything, and now we'll hit the Pack Translate button. At this point you might be slightly confused because a pack has definitely taken place. The islands have kept their orientation, but they appear to have been scaled, which shouldn't be happening. This brings us back to our good old friend the AutoFit button. Remember, if this button is enabled, an AutoFit operation will be executed after any pack command. So let's back up with Ctrl Z. We'll turn AutoFit off and we'll run the Pack Translate again. This time we are getting the results we expect. The islands have maintained their orientation and scale. Okay, moving on to the Fit button, which is located here. This tool rescales selected islands with no deformation. To demonstrate this, I'm going to select all of our islands and I'm going to shift them outside of the UV space, and I'm going to pull one of our islands back in. So let's hit the Fit button. As you can see, the island has been scaled up to use as much of the UV space as possible, but keeping the height and width ratio, i.e. no deformation. Next we have the Squarify tool, located here. This is much like the Fit button with the exception that it allows for deformation. So let's hit that. As you can see, the island has been scaled and deformed to utilise as much UV tile space as possible. This may make authoring textures more difficult in some cases, but may not matter in others. Let's undo that, unselect our islands, turn AutoFit back on and repack. Next up we have the Orange Island Rescale tool, that's here. This tool looks at the average area of unselected islands and then applies that average area to the selected islands. Let me demonstrate by shrinking all our islands down, so let's select them. We'll shrink all of them down. Then we will remove one of our islands and scale this up. With this island selected, let's hit the Orange Island Rescale button. As you can see, the area of all the unselected islands has been evaluated and then applied to our selected island. This is evident as our selected island should now fit into the gap it previously occupied, which it does. Okay, let's get our island back out again and scale it up. Something that is important to note, the average area of unselected islands will only be applied to selected islands within the bounds of the tile. So if we drag this selected island out and then hit the orange scale button, nothing happens. This has to be within the bounds of the tile for this to work. This tool also works if no islands are selected. The average area from all islands is evaluated, then applied to all islands. This means larger islands will be scaled down and smaller islands will be scaled up. So if I unselect this island and run it again, you can see that this got scaled down to the average area of all islands, and these islands got scaled up because this larger island had a larger surface area. On a related note, if any islands have been hidden, then the surface area of these islands will not be evaluated, but instead ignored. Let's back up a step and move on to our next tool. So next we have the Blue Island Rescale tool, located here. This is almost the inverse of the tool we've just looked at. It evaluates the average area of the selected islands and then applies that average to our selection. So I'm actually going to drag out two more islands, so let's grab this one and we'll scale this up slightly And we'll have this one as well. And then I'm going to select all three of these and hit the blue island Rescale tool. As you can see, the average area of these islands has been calculated and then applied across all of the selected islands. You may be wondering what the point of this tool is. Well, you may have a part of your model which is made of multiple islands but doesn't require much room on the UV tile. This tool ensures that the average area for these islands are maintained no matter how big or small you decide to make them. Okay, I'm going to unselect everything and perform a pack. Okay, next we're going to look at the margin value, which is located here. The margin value controls the space between the tile border and the islands on the outer extremities of the UV space. So I'm just going to zoom into the left bottom corner here. And you can see a gap between this island and the edge of the UV tile. This is the margin. The current margin value is set to 2, but that really doesn't tell us much. 2 what exactly? Well, if we scoot across to units, which is here, we can see that it's currently set to pixels. We'll come back to this setting shortly, but for now we just need to understand that the margin value is 2 pixels. Let's change this value to 20 pixels. And hit pack. As you can see, the space between the tile border and the edge islands is much bigger. But what is it that defines this gap as 20 pixels? Surely for RizomUV to know this margin represents 20 pixels, then the height and width of the UV tile in pixels must also be known. That's where our next setting comes in, map resolution, which is located here. As our units are set to pixels, this number represents our tile height and width, which is 1024 by 1024 in pixels. So our margin value is a fraction of our map resolution. Let's put our margin back to 2 pixels and repack. Okay, next we have the spacing value located here. This setting will add space in pixels between each island. Let's make this number a bit more extreme. Say 40. And we'll zoom out a little bit and repack. You'll notice that not only is there more space between our islands, but our islands have also been scaled to accommodate this spacing. Let's return our spacing value to 4 pixels. And repack. Now some of you out there not in the know may be thinking, why does island spacing and margins even matter? Who cares if the spacing is 2 pixels or 10 pixels? So I just quickly wanted to go over a use case for spacing and margins. Say you have a model like our scooter here. You unwrap it and pack it, and then you use a texture authoring program like Substance Painter to create a texture map for the model. But the texture you create only extends to the borders of our UV islands. You then export your model to a game engine like Unity or Unreal, and it looks like this. Here you can clearly see visible seams between UV islands. This is caused by MIP mapping. In simple terms, MIP mapping is the automatic scaling down of textures dependent on distance to the camera. This scaling down makes interpolation of pixels at UV borders fuzzy, resulting in visible seams. There are a few ways of dealing with this. One would be to turn off MIP mapping in your game engine. This wouldn't be desirable as it would incur a performance cost. So what is typically done is to extend the texture beyond the UV borders, as shown in this image. You can clearly see the edge of the UV polygon here, and you can see that the pixels have been extended beyond the border of the UV. So obviously, to accommodate this pixel bleeding, we need to make sure there is enough space between UV islands. Okay, next we'll shift back to units. It's currently set to pixels, but we also have the option of real units mode. So let's hit that. You'll notice that the map resolution here is now greyed out. That is because it is no longer relevant. And you'll also notice that our margin and spacing values have dramatically changed. This is because these values are no longer based on pixels, but instead relative values to the UV space. If we look at the UI at the side and the bottom of our tile, we can see that the UV space is defined by a value between 0 and 1. This means that our margin and spacing values are now a fraction of our UV space. For instance, if I wanted the margin to be 1/10 of our UV space, I would just enter 0.1. And now if I pack, we can see that the margin is now 1/10 of the total length of the UV space. Okay, let's return to pixels and return our margin value back to 2, and we repack. Next up we have the Texel Density tools located here. Texel Density is a subject which deserves a level of attention which I can't give it in this tutorial. With that said, rizom-lab has some excellent information on the subject. This article goes into Texel Density, how to calculate it, and a good amount of information on it. So I'll make sure a link to this article is in the video description. For now, I'll just go over the basic use of these tools. Let's grab our UV islands and shrink them down. Next, I'll pull out an island and make it bigger again, like I did before. With this island selected, we can find out its texel density by hitting the pick button. You will notice that the number here has now changed. This is the texel density for our island. We can transfer that texel density to another island simply by selecting another island and pressing the set button. These two islands now share the same texel density. Let's unselect our island and repack. Next up, we're going to take a look at the packing quality located up here. Each button represents a preset for the value in this number field. This number is an expression of the resolution of the packing algorithm. Put simply, the better the quality of packing, the longer the pack takes. Let's hit the gold button, which gives us a packing resolution of 1000, and we'll hit pack. Keep an eye on the bottom left section down here, which will give us information about the pack. As you can see, the pack took much longer than the normal setting, but the UV space appears to have been utilised much more efficiently. I'm going to return the quality to normal and repack. Moving on to mutations, located here. By default, this is set to 1. Mutations can be seen as tests to find the best packing solution. If we set this to 10 tests will be performed and the best solution will be chosen based on space usage. So let's select 10 and run a pack. As you can see, this is the chosen mutation out of the 10 tested. Very Darwinian. A combination of packing quality and mutations can be utilised, but be careful with these settings because you could cause packing times to become unnecessarily long. Let's set the quality to gold and the mutations to 1000 and pack. As you can see down in the bottom left of the UI, we get a display readout for which pack mutation is currently being run and a percentage for that pack. It's probably pretty evident at this stage that our settings are way too high and this will take forever. Fortunately, next to this display, we have a stop button, which allows us to abandon this large calculation. So let's hit that. Let's return the quality to normal and mutations to 1. And we'll repack. Okay, let's talk orientation. Under initial orientation, located here at the top, we can choose whether our islands are orientated vertically or horizontally. It's currently set to vertical, which is this button here, and that is the pack result that we already have. But we can switch this to horizontal and pack again. Now you can see that our islands are orientated horizontally. We can also turn the initial orientation off using this button here, which means no pre-orientation of our islands will occur. We can also better define island orientation using the step settings here. By choosing a step angle of 90 degrees, the packing algorithm will look for the best packing solution with the limitation of a 90-degree orientation. With this setting, we would expect our island orientation to be a mixture of vertical and horizontal. So let's choose 90 degrees and pack again. As you can see, some of our islands are aligned horizontally and some vertically. I'm going to return to a vertical arrangement, make sure our step is set back to off, and repack. Also under initial orientation, we have these XYZ buttons here. Each of these buttons align the chosen axis in 3D space with the V axis in UV space. So let me demonstrate. If I select this island here and this island here, we can see the up direction is Y. So we can make the Y direction match the V direction in UV space by clicking on the Y button and then packing. And as you can see, these are now orientated the same way they are in the 3D view. We can also do that with these back sections as well. But instead of aligning the Y direction to V, we can choose the X direction and then pack. You'll notice that when I return to the initial islands, this information is retained. Let's select these islands again and set them back to a vertical orientation, unselect them and repack. Let's move briefly on to stacking. You may have a situation where you have very similar islands that will be textured the same. A good example of this would be leaves on a tree. This means these islands can use the same part of the texture map and their UVs can be stacked. If we take a look in the select drop down on the right hand side, we can see a section called Similar Islands. All we need to do is select an island. Let's get our select tool back. And now we just need to hit the Select Similar Islands button here. As you can see, RizomUV has evaluated the islands in the tile and has selected the islands with similar features. This may not always work, but this slider here can be used to control the tolerance for similarity. In my case, this wasn't needed. Now we have our island selected, all we have to do now is open up the Align drop down and use the Stacking button. Our islands are now stacked. However, if a global pack is performed, this stacking will be undone. We'll come back to this issue shortly and we'll address it. Let's back up. Okay, moving on. Let's talk groups. First, let's collapse down the seams and the unwrap panel to give us a little bit more room, and we'll expand island groups. Grouping islands together in RizomUV is very powerful. It means we can keep islands packed together by a number of differing criteria. So let's start with the simple stuff. To create a group, first we select some islands we'd like to be grouped together. So I'm just going to go for these large ones here. Then we just need to hit the Create button in the Island Group panel, or use the shortcut G. As you can see, our islands are now surrounded by a new bounding box. I'm going to move our new group out of the UV space by holding spacebar and dragging it out. Okay, I'm going to unselect our islands. If you want to select the islands within the group, we can hit the island label on the bounding box here. Now that the islands are selected, we can pack these islands within the context of this group by hitting P. We can also alter the shape of the group container by dragging the upper right corner. Now when we repack our islands, they should try to occupy our new group shape. To pack the group itself, we need to select the group name label. In this case it's G0. So we can select that and we can hit pack. Notice that even though the group as a whole has been packed, the positions of the islands within the group have remained the same. Let's undo that. If you would like to unselect the group, that can't be done by clicking an empty space, but it can be done by clicking on the X label on the group. Now that our group is not selected, let's hit pack again. Notice that our islands are still retaining their positions within the group, but the empty spaces are being occupied with islands from outside the group. Let's back up again with Ctrl Z. Before I move on, I just want to mention a few other things. Up in the Island Group panel, up here, we have the option of turning on and off the labels for our group. So we can turn off the outlines, we can turn off the bounding box, and we can turn off the labels. I actually find these quite helpful, so I prefer to leave them on. The last of the simple group functionality is ungrouping islands. We simply select the group and we can either hit the remove button up here or the shortcut Ctrl G. Now our islands are ungrouped. We can pack again. Another powerful grouping tool is the ability to group based on objects or materials. Grouping islands this way makes texture authoring much easier when object or material islands are together. We can do this by opening up the Show Model Groups dialog. This can be done by going to the Select menu here and Show Model Groups, or it can be done in the Select drop down here. As you can see, we can select and group islands based on a few criteria. I'm going to be selecting based on object because my objects were already set up by material. So I'm going to shrink this window down and move it over here. And I'm going to select all of my objects, select, and then press the In New Groups button. This can now be closed. Okay, all our objects are now in groups, and you'll notice that all of our islands are selected but not our group containers. So let's hit pack. As is apparent, all of the islands have been packed within their respected groups, but the group containers have not been packed, hence the overlapping islands. So let's back up with Ctrl Z. This time I'm going to deselect our islands by clicking an empty space, and then I'm going to select all of our group containers by clicking on All under the Island Groups panel. Now that our group containers are selected, I'm going to pack again. This time all the group containers have been packed, but the islands inside have remained in their respective positions. I could pack all the islands first, then select and pack all the group containers, but there is a more efficient way. Let's back up again and deselect everything. We can hit this None button here. And up in the Packing Properties panel, we have a button called Pack All. When enabled, performing a pack operation will pack all islands within the groups before executing a pack for the group layout. So let's pack now. All the islands are being packed, and now the group should be distributed. There's a little bit of overlap here, so I'm just going to run the pack again, and that should sort it out. Perfect. Now our groups have been separated out with no overlaps. This may be enough for some of you, but for others we may want to do some beautifying work, and RizomUV has the tools to do this. So let's have a look at a few of these tools. I'm just going to choose this group. All of these islands share the same material, but we've got some little bits and bobs scattered about, and we may want to line these up and make it a little bit nicer to look at. So I'm going to grab these two islands and I'm going to grab them, hold spacebar so I can shift them up here, and we can use some of these align tools to make sure they're aligned. So I'm going to make sure they're aligned at the top there. I'm also going to grab these two and also shift these across as well, and I'm going to grab some of these. I'm going to shift those across. I'm just going to move this out of the way for now. Now you may want to arrange these in a nice little grid pattern, something like that. Okay. Now we can use these align tools to actually make sure these line up with each other. So if I select these three here, I can actually align them to the right hand side, and now they're all in a nice straight line. I can do the same with these as well, so they all line up, and I can do the same with these. And now I can do it in this direction and have them all line up at the top. And again, the same with these ones, and the same with these. So you can go through and you can arrange your UV layout exactly how you'd like them. Now it may be the case that if I was to repack, it would destroy some of the work that we've just done here. So I want to talk about locking. So for instance, say I was happy with these islands here, I could select them and then lock them up here. You'll notice that there's a black outline around these islands now, which indicates they're locked. I can do the same for these as well. So if I were to unselect everything and now repack, we can see that the groups have been shifted around, but the islands that were within this group have been locked in their positions. The same can be done for groups as well. So let's back up a step. Say I didn't want this group to move. I can actually select this group and lock the entire group. Let's unselect this and pack again. Now there was actually a slight shift with the group, and that's because we have AutoFit turned on. So if I back up and turn AutoFit off and then pack again, you can see that the group remained in its place. I actually want to return to something that I touched upon earlier, which was the stacking. And if you remember, I was saying that if you performed a pack, it would ruin the stacking that you had. So I just want to show you group stacking. So let's select all of our groups, and we'll remove our groups, and we'll run a pack again. So as before, we can select this, select similar islands, and now that our islands are selected, we can stack them on top of each other. But if I was to pack again, it would separate this stacked arrangement. So let's back up. So instead of using this, we can actually use these tools up here, specifically this one, which is group stack. So if I hit that, it now stacks them on top of each other, but within a group. And as you can see here, we've got group 0 and it says stack. Now if I was to select the islands within this group, well, a bit of stretching going on there, but we'll ignore that for now. If I was to select the islands in this group and press P, they don't get separated out because it knows that they're stacked. Also, when packing the group as well, if I was to select the group and pack, the stacking remains the same. So that concludes my overview of packing. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.